23rd day, Middle Wind Month, 1 CE, Ilinawalai Conhelaya made his way through the mist along the broad stone road that followed the river to the sea. The river's rushing waters offered the only sounds in the stillness of the morning as he walked past the countless human farms that straddled its course. At his shoulder, Eneleli, the leader of one of the tribes under his clan and a longtime friend, eyed the surroundings warily. "What is the point in this?" Eneleli said. "We have a long march ahead of us, and I doubt that the humans will respond favorably." "There is no harm in asking," Ilinawalai replied. "I feel my honor chafing with every step," his friend sighed. He could empathize with his frustrations. 5 months had passed since the discovery of the verdant valley hidden far in the south. With how quickly the humans in the mountains on the way had given up their territories, he never imagined that they would still be trying to take it nearly 2 seasons later. A part of him blamed himself, as the initial results made him confident that the humans would be firmly under Beastman control before the wet season. Mostly, however, he blamed Sage Khhschlr, who was managing their efforts in the Draconic Kingdom since the loss of Elindratha. The late Warmaster would have probably foreseen the issues they would face and chided Ilinawalai for his reckless optimism. Then he would have dispatched the forces necessary for a swift and decisive conquest. 2 silhouettes appeared in the mist, resolving into a pair of hunters that had been dispatched ahead of them. The 2 jogged up to report their findings. "We're clear to the coast," one of them said. "It doesn't look like the humans have left the city since the deluge started." "I don't blame them," Ilinawalai grumbled. "Any sane person would be at home with their families right now." The morning fog dissipated over the next hour, revealing the long bay with the city at its western end. The obnoxiously resilient human fortress was positioned atop a modest cliff overlooking the bay, with sheer cliffs that ran along its southern side until they joined with the sea. A 10-meter-high wall of grey basalt stretched from the cliffs to the sea. Access to the city by land was limited to a barren defile past the bridge leading to its western gate. Even the Khan, who thrived in rugged, mountainous terrain, couldn't challenge its natural defenses. Early on, an attempt had been made through the water against the harbour nestled far on the eastern side of the city, but the assault had been prematurely ended by the humans' hidden allies. Why would they side with the humans, anyway? They would see all demi-humans dead if presented with the opportunity. The bay was inhabited by a clan of aquatic demi-humans whose appearance still eluded them. All that mattered, however, was that Ilinawalai's forces were no match for them in the water. To make matters worse, the demi-humans conducted trade with the humans, serving as an unassailable supply line. In an attempt to sway the aquatic demi-humans to their side, a few of the civilian tribes attempted to initiate trade with them. Those attempts, however, were simply ignored. For their confederation, it was an unprecedented situation. If the world was filled with alliances between different peoples, then Rolengork suffered a worrisome disadvantage. All of their neighbors were some level of hostile. The tribes of the Wallspine to their north were simply savages who saw everyone else as food. The Yorgulans in the east served the malevolent whims of their green dragon masters. To their south, the merchants of the Great Loot only sought to exploit them for resources, squeezing them for everything that they were worth. The humans of the west sought their extermination. Hundreds of heads popped up along the city wall as Ilinawalai and his entourage approached. He scanned the battlements, looking for anyone that resembled a human lord. Several arrows struck the road a few dozen meters ahead and skipped away. "I will only say this once," Ilinawalai directed his voice to the group atop the gatehouse. "A horde of undead has swept in from your country's northwest. Half of the Draconic Kingdom has already fallen to their advance. You should stick to trying to eat us," a human male in the center of the group replied. "Your skills as a bard are dismal, at best." "This is no tale." Ilinawalai roared up at him. "The undead are enemies of all that live, and we would have your warriors join us to face this dire threat." The human lord glanced at the males to either side of him. A low chuckle rose from his throat, which was echoed by the defenders from parapet to parapet. Their laughter grew, echoing off of the cliffs above. "Is that the best you can come up with, you slithering hairball?" he shouted down at him. "There is no fool in existence who would fall for your preposterous proposal." "I speak no falsehoods," Ilinawalai growled, "and I do not believe for one moment that a lord would give his people up to the undead. You have no proof of your claim. Even if they were coming, we're more than happy to have them take care of you first. They will come for you, next. Then let them come." The Lord raised his longbow overhead. The walls of Fortune Bay will ever stand proud and flat, just like our glorious queen. Uo. The thunderous cheer of the city's defenders rolled over them and up the valley. Shouldn't it be proud and tall? Eneleli said. There's definitely something wrong with these people. Elinawalai flicked an ear. Come on, let's get out of here. With his task carried out, he led their warbands back up to the valley. 5 kilometers to the east, the main body of his forces was preparing for the journey north. As they did, warbands occasionally arrived from the mountain valleys all around to add to their number. This call is just too sudden, Elinawalai said. I bet that KHHSCHLR expects 100,000 of us to come up the highway to her aid. The runner never said we'd be fighting as soon as we arrived, Eneleli noted. But you're right, we won't be able to muster even a third of our forces in any reasonable time frame. Their fight in the mountains of the south wasn't anything like what had happened in the lowlands of the north. Thousands of skirmishes in hundreds of valleys, ridges, and forests flared up every day. They may have had 100,000 between their warriors and civilians, but those numbers were spread out across the southern ranges and couldn't be recalled so easily. He made his way through the chaotic preparations and entered a small grove along the river where the lords were trying to coordinate their impromptu reassignment. Most of them were too busy with one thing or another to greet him, so he was able to go straight to the group gathered around a wide stone table. What are we at? Elinawalai asked. 15,000, one of the lords answered. We may have 20 by this evening. Did we at least manage to contact Elinchawi? No, the lord shook his head. It's unreasonable to think that we could reach Elinchawi, Elinall, Elinvorst and Elinsar on such short notice. Elinawalai sighed. Not only did they distribute their clans across a 200-kilometer-wide theater, but the nature of the conflict was highly mobile. The runners sent out to recall the clans could spend weeks wandering around without finding them. They'll arrive when they arrive, I guess, he said. How long before we're ready to depart? Before noon. We've sent hunters to screen the way ahead already. If they left by noon, they would arrive at the human fortress guarding the pass by evening. Sage KHHSHCLR wanted them right away, but there was no such convenient thing. A long column of cons snaked out of the camp an hour before noon, and Elinawalai took his place at the front. After taking a look at their immediate surroundings, his gaze went to the clouds shrouding the mountain peaks in the north. How are the conditions ahead? He asked a nearby mystic. We expect rain, the mystic replied, but that should be a given during the deluge. Even so, we should be fine so long as we use this road. The deluge brought different conditions to different parts of Rolengork, and the Draconic Kingdom was no different. While the winds of the season could send temperatures plummeting along the wall's spine and flood the jungles of the basin, the deluge in the south created hazards such as flash floods and mudslides. I wonder if the people back home could imitate this road, Elinawalai said. It's so miraculously resistant against the elements that I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me it was made through magic. We've confirmed that the road is not magic, at least, the mystic chuckled. Which makes it even more of a wonder. We should learn how to construct them after all this is over and we finish subjugating the humans. Elinawalai grunted in agreement. While the lowlands could rely on its robust river networks for transportation, the highland homes of the Con exclusively relied on trails and roads. Every year, hundreds of routes were washed out by floods, mudslides or simple erosion, and the introduction of the Draconic Kingdom's land infrastructure would be an incalculable boon. An hour into their ascent, a drizzle started, which eventually turned into steady rain. The usually dry gulches turned into catchments that added churning torrents of water to the river along the road. A peal of thunder occasionally rattled the stones, but there appeared to be no threats along their path aside from natural ones. Do you think the humans will move once they realize we've left? Eneleli asked. I don't doubt it, Elinawalai answered. They can enjoy their freedom for now. When we return from this, we aren't sheathing our claws. The light approach against the humans forced upon them by Sage KHHSHCLR had proven to be a terrible move. Without acting to decisively crush all human resistance as Elindratha had, the humans seemed willing to fight without end. If it was just that, it would have been fine. It was natural for prey to flee predators or fight for their lives, after all. The problem was that they were mysteriously getting better at fighting. All of the mystics that he asked didn't seem to have an answer as to why, But reality could not be denied. The situation had developed to the point where it seemed that the entire region was embroiled in conflict, and the promising new land for the civilian migrants had turned into a death trap. It wasn't something that happened when they were simply raiding the Draconic Kingdom, and they needed to deal with it as soon as possible. Since Sage Khshschlr had called even the warrior clans of the homeland for aid, Elandratha entertained the idea of bringing them in to assist with the humans once the undead were dealt with. Fighting the undead was a fruitless endeavor, so more than a few clan lords would likely be receptive to his proposals. Payment for their services could be rendered over time. The day went by uneventfully, and evening saw the familiar landmarks that indicated they were near the top of the pass. His intuition as a war leader told him that this was the most dangerous part of their journey. The road hugged a canyon wall that wound with the course of the river over 1,000 meters below, and the clouds above were low enough that one might believe they could reach out and touch them. When he had first taken the pass, the humans used the road's narrow width to great effect, forcing head-on engagements against their defensive formations and limiting the number of beastmen that could fight at once. The fighting went on for weeks, at which point the honor of his warriors was satisfied and Elinawali could step forward to single-handedly tear apart the entire human army. Since the humans no longer fought that way, the sense of danger was likely just the recognition of dangerous terrain and the memory of that struggle. Still, it took a good half-hour for him to settle down. There it is, he pointed as a massive fortress appeared in the clouds ahead. I can't wait to get dry, Gem. Shouldn't our scouts have reported back to us by now? It's been more than long enough for them to get there and back again, Eneleli agreed. Elinawali held up a paw. The column halted behind him. His sense of danger returned and he looked all around him for its source. Rain, clouds, mountains and more clouds. Had the humans occupied the fortress again? Since the nature of the conflict had changed, the structure became all but useless and both sides had left it empty. He peered in the direction of the daunting structure, half expecting an arrow to come flying out of the mist. And then an orb of fire came flying out of the mist, exploding at his feet and enveloping the road in flame. Screams of pain and panic rose from below as the Beastman column was hammered by a hail of fireballs. The underside of Raoul's skeletal dragon glowed orange as 25 sets of 4 elder liches raised a 4-kilometer stretch of Fortune Pass. There was nowhere for the beastmen to run, they could only burn. Well, they could jump, but that'd kill them all the same. The advance into the eastern provinces of the Draconic Kingdom was going well on paper, but there was plenty of unexpected weirdness going on for the people on the field. In terms of battles, the inferno rising below him was actually the first formal one for the forces under his command. Are you sure I'm having an effect? He asked. Yes, the elder lich riding behind him answered. How much? Without knowing the exact strength of our opposition, this one cannot provide an exact number. Yet you say I'm having an effect. Yes. Raoul frowned and scratched his head. The elder lich was sure he had an effect, but it didn't have any evidence that he had an effect. Only a feeling. For Raoul's part, he didn't feel anything coming out. He wasn't even trying to make anything come out, he was just sitting there wrinkling his nose at the smell of a lot of burnt hair. The maneuver is complete, the elder lich said. Did we get them all? No. Really? How many fireballs did they cast? There were 100 elder liches. It took 6 seconds for each of them to cast one spell and they had been casting spells for about 2 minutes. That made it. The damage variance of fireball is high, the elder lich said. If one is lucky, an average beastman civilian can survive up to 4 regular fireballs from a black counterfeiter. And if they were unlucky, they were fried in one. It did explain why each flight of elder liches had 4 members, though. Raoul ordered the skeletal dragon to fly lower as he surveyed the aftermath. Every dozen or so meters, a shocked and thoroughly singed beastman stood over a long carpet of corpses. Rather than a battle, it was more of a precisely calculated magical artillery strike. According to Captain Zarodnik, tales of adventure and powerful wizards flinging spells served as poor references for commanders. As an adventurer herself, she explained that a lot of the flashy stuff in stories was, in reality, highly luck-dependent. A fireball could be as devastating as the bards described, or it could do next to nothing. In the case of rogues and other nimble targets, that same fireball could end up doing nothing at all. The captain had her own stories of adventurers, many of which contained events where bad luck with magic prematurely ended their team exercises. Raoul's low-rank league matches had proven those stories to be true, as even the use of low-level skeleton mages produced wildly variable results. Using meta-magic fixed many of those luck-related problems, but it dramatically increased the cost of spells. It was something like the difference between a jab and a haymaker. Hitting with a haymaker would hurt a lot more, but missing was costly. A different sort of thinking was required for an army, however. Especially one that was caster-rich like the Sorceress Kingdoms. The sheer scale of a theater made the group tactics and awe-inspiring feats of magic portrayed in tales of adventure generally useless. In the place of those heroic feats came cold calculation that weighed spells in terms of their statistical efficiency. Most of the Royal Army's mana wasn't spent on spells that dealt direct damage at all. All it took to heal the average damage of a single fireball was a decent area effect healing spell, and divine casters tended to be the most plentiful type of caster in any force. A summoned wraith could sneak around hurting and draining hundreds of people, forcing healers to use hundreds of healing spells at the cost of a single spell. One could support a death warrior that could hit harder than a fireball with every swing, or cover their forces with clouds of fog, preventing the enemy from endlessly whittling away at them through ranged skirmishing. There simply were too many things that one could do with their mana that were more efficient. Of course, there was a place for damage-dealing spells, which was when you needed something to die now and they couldn't be reached in any better way. The Undead Horde strategy provided few opportunities to do so, but they did present some good ones occasionally. The Beastman column trying to cross Fortune Pass was one of them. The General Staff predicted that the Beastmen would recall their forces in the south once the Undead renewed their advance. When they did, Raoul was waiting for them with the Elder Liches dominating the Undead on his part of the front. What should we do with these leftovers? We lack the appropriate assets to assess their strength, the Elder Lich said, but they should all be at least the equivalent of Mithril rank adventurers. Caution is advised. Let's just get rid of them with wraiths, I guess. 400 wraiths swept over the pass, wailing dramatically as they did. The surviving beastmen had no chance, except for the one at the front, who destroyed all the wraiths. What the heck? Raoul frowned. How strong is that guy? This one estimates that the target should be in the so-called realm of heroes. I believe that our adventurer guild would rate it at adamantite too. That was stupid strong. As strong as the Death Series servitors. A magic harrow barrage should be the most efficient means of eliminating the target, the Elder Lich said. Sure, let's do that, Raoul said. We have to get back to all those villages or we'll fall behind. The blue-white flares of hundreds of magic harrows flashed through the clouds. Their last target finally fell to the ground. The Elder Liches formed up around Raoul's skeletal dragon and they flew back north. Raoul sighed as the Draconic Kingdom's riverlands came back into view. How many do we have to go? 75 villages, 8 towns and 1 large town. Uck. Back when he had first decided to become an apprentice commander, the work awaiting him would have never entered his mind. Rather than dealing with their enemies, he spent most of his time dealing with their allies. His skeletal dragon descended toward a town that straddled a small river. At least this one wouldn't be as bad as some of the others. The effectiveness of the Beastmen's efforts to sedate the Draconic Kingdom's population varied depending on each settlement's water source. Since they were basically poisoning the water supply, the villages and towns that depended on wells were hit the hardest. Dumping Lera into running water was nowhere near as effective, but it could poison everyone downstream. The further downstream a village was, the worse it got. An advisory had been issued to all of the towns and villages along the Orichalon to the west, as well. Captain Zaradnik said that there was no way that such a huge river in the middle of the rainy season could be poisoned by so little, but the Draconic Kingdom's government wanted to play it safe. The Elder Lich cast invisibility on the skeletal dragon when they got within a few kilometers of the town, and they landed on a muddy road a few dozen meters away. He straightened his outfit and took a deep breath before walking up to its broken gate. A man with a staff barred the way. "Who are you?" the man asked. "My name's Raoul. I've come with a message from the Queen." He waited patiently as the man with the staff ran off. When he first started visiting the villages, he introduced himself as a member of the Sorceress Kingdom's royal army. That, however, only invited suspicion. Speaking in the name of the queen, on the other hand, was like casting a magic spell. The sentry returned with 5 girls and 1 boy, who were in turn followed by a small crowd. Raoul examined each, but they were all pretty much dressed the same. "Did any of your nobles survive?" he asked. They shook their heads. Raoul was pretty sure that would always be the answer, but he was instructed to ask just in case. "Then, are there any temple staff?" 3 of the girls raised their hands. Raoul looked at the other 2. "Who are you?" "We're with the Merchant Guild," the boy said. "Well, the Merchant Guild hasn't been working for over a year, but—" "That's fine," Raoul said. "I just need people who can help coordinate the citizens." "How many were poisoned by the stuff the beastmen put in the water?" The group exchanged glances. "A bunch on the north side of the town are acting sort of funny," the boy said, "but I think the rest of us are all right. I don't feel poisoned, anyway." Raoul looked at the 3 temple staff. "Those people on the north side were poisoned," one of the girls said, "but they should be okay after a few days." "Why do you ask?" "Queen Auriculus wants the people to move west just in case the beastmen try something funny," Raoul said. "Some of the villages out there are poisoned really bad, so we've been trying to figure out how to get everyone where they need to be." "We can help," the girl said, and the others nodded. "Just tell us where we need to go." They were good people. If it was Riastais, half of them would be trying to screw the other half over. And that was without anything like demi-human raids or famines going on. In the Draconic Kingdom, they got raided regularly and had been treated as livestock for over a year, yet their first thought upon being freed was to help others. He wondered why things were so different here. After delivering his instructions, he made his way around the town looking for anything he might need to report. Though a lot of things were simplified due to the beastmen banning metal tools and things that might be used as weapons against them, the town was kept in good condition. That simplification extended to the townsfolk as well, with their clothing being well tended, but lacking in any sophistication or color. Everyone wore straw sandals and Raoul stuck out like a sore thumb. "Hey, how many girls are you married to?" "Arg, this again." He turned to find a girl his age standing behind him. She took a step back, clutching a thin shawl in front of her in an effort to hide her swollen belly. "I'm sorry," Raoul said in a clear voice. "I'm not from this country." "Oh." The girl turned away, as did 24 others who had been stalking him down the street. Raoul turned back to his work, feeling like a jerk for some reason. Every village and town he had visited was filled with pregnant girls. Followers of the Six didn't get married until they were 20, so it was just weird to see. Yet, all he could feel was pity. They would be kids raising kids, and most of them were still apprentices. How would they even be able to take care of themselves and all the babies? The elder liches said something about a 1:50 male-female ratio as well, so raising a family in a remotely normal way was pretty much impossible. They came to him hoping for at least something, yet he couldn't provide it. Every time he turned them down he felt powerless and inadequate, like a 12-year-old failure of a man. Once he completed his rounds, he returned to the spot on the road where he thought the skeletal dragon was. The elder lich dispelled its invisibility and helped him back up. "Report," the elder lich said after they took to the skies again. "We're close to the mountains," Raoul said, "so the lair poisoning isn't severe. Just some people on the south side of town. The town leadership said that they can assist with the surrounding villages." After completing his report, Raoul stared down at the countryside as the elder lich relayed the information. Even with so much martial might at his command, there was so little he could do. He could only pray that someone could figure out how to fix the huge mess. "This is all steel, ain't it? Won't it rust up?" "We have models that won't rust, but the suite of enchantments that they come with increase the price of the frame and whatever attachments it comes with 20-fold. Leanne's legs dangled over the edge of the crate she was seated on, her heels thumping lightly in a disjointed rhythm. Nearby, one of the representatives she brought in to showcase and promote her new vehicles was speaking to a small group of merchants. The prolonged occupation of the Draconic Kingdom did a number on anything that required more than simple maintenance, so it turned out to be even more of a golden opportunity for sales than she initially expected. 20-fold? One of the merchants recoiled. "They better fly for that price." "They don't fly, yet," the representative smiled. "It's simply the reality of enchanting anything. The vehicles that I mentioned are made for long-range, high-speed routes that go for extended periods without maintenance, and they're overkill for the routes in the Draconic Kingdom. A good old coat of paint is more than enough for the conditions here. Beyond the showcase pavilion, the rain pattered over the city street. She never knew it could rain so much. Her travels had taken her through Carnassus to the Great Northern Steppe, but it just got more arid as they went further east. The models that the representative mentioned weren't specifically for climes that were harsh on vehicles, but for the domestic routes in the Sorceress Kingdom where Solitas endlessly moved goods and people all over the Duchy of Erantal. They just happened to be immune to rust, everyday wear, had adequate suspension for high-speed movement over rough rural roads, plus had heated seats and a bunch of other conveniences. On top of that, the representative said, if anything rusts up too much or breaks, our system of interchangeable parts allows anyone to replace anything quickly and cheaply. One can find anything they need in any of the company branches we're opening across the Draconic Kingdom. You can guarantee that those parts will fit in any vehicle? Any of our vehicles, the representative nodded. All one has to do is pick up the appropriate replacements right off the shelf. If there do happen to be any defects, we'll replace the part free of additional charge. If you'll just follow me to the yard here, our staff will show you exactly how simple and convenient our system is. The woman led the merchants around to the lot just inside the Sorceress Kingdom's exclave in Oraculon. Most of the area was still pretty bare, and proper construction of its warehouses, offices, shops, parks, and residences would take a few years. For the time being, their cargo containers worked as temporary storage and a small plaza facilitated the beginnings of their efforts to establish a commercial foothold in the capital. Leanne slid off of her crate and went to see what else was going on. A pavilion had been set up by Zusharu's company, creating a wide, dry area that he put together with several other merchants. They did what they could to brighten up the place, hiring a few bards, some cooks to run food stands, and the staff was dressed to encourage a more lively atmosphere. It was an uphill battle, however, as the rainy season was traditionally quiet in the Draconic Kingdom and the people otherwise had their hands full with local recovery efforts. That being said, the merchants could easily afford to keep things going. Most of their profits came not from the goods they brought with them, but from the commodity contracts they had slipped into the local markets. The first wave of traders from the Sorceress Kingdom made money hand over fist, including Leanne and her friends. She found Florian leaning on a tent post to the side of the pavilion's main clearing, listening to a song that made the rain seem even rainier. Rather than dampening the mood, however, the mild strain created a sort of cozy comfort, as if inviting those outside to enjoy the fellowship within. You didn't stay for the demonstration? I've seen it a jillion times already, Leanne said. How are things going here? I think most of these people came with those merchants looking at the wagons, Florian replied. It's been a trickle, otherwise. Things looked pitiful compared to a bustling city market, but it was still worth it. They just had to keep working to bring people in and things would eventually get better. No one would come to do business if they didn't know there was business to be had, after all. They left the pavilion under umbrellas held up by Rose and Tier, making their way back to the palace quarter. With the Royal Army's big push well underway, the Draconic Kingdom's administration was preparing to deal with the aftermath of their long occupation. There wasn't anything official from Queen Auricula's court yet, but the reports from the Royal Army were grim enough. Such a long face, Florian said with a slight smile. Do you miss K.O. that much? Well, Leanne said, since he's stuck in Fallujah, that's one less courtier on our side here. I'm sure that Sorul will come up with something new and boring to torment us with. I think Queen Auricula's court is shaping up very nicely, Florian said. It's nowhere near as ham-fisted as it was before. How do you even know that? They won't even give us the time of day. They won't give you the time of day, perhaps, Florian said. I don't see why you would expect them to with your endless poking and prodding. Humph. According to Florian, it was good that she was doing what she was doing, yet it was still her fault that she suffered the consequences. Not that she cared. The Draconic Kingdom could do whatever it wanted so long as the Sorceress Kingdom also got what it wanted. So, Florian said, do you miss K.O. that much? Leanne gave Florian a look. He's a nice guy to have around, but if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, it won't work. He's Count K.O. now, which means that he's off limits. Florian reached out and patted her shoulder. Leanne wasn't sure what the big deal was. It wasn't as if she and Soren had gotten anywhere. The situation of the Draconic Kingdom doomed any chance from the start. At best, he was a connection that was pleasant to keep company with. Bringing a spare back with her was perfectly fine, but two title holders didn't mix. This was already the case within a country's borders, never mind between different countries. The products of any union between them would be the heir to House Wagner and House Kao, meaning that they would both be subjects of the Sorceress Kingdom and the Draconic Kingdom. This was a legal headache and a political taboo which led to any number of problems. The worst case was if the title holder decided that they favored one sovereign over the other and suddenly there was effectively a chunk of the Sorceress Kingdom or a chunk of the Draconic Kingdom inside one or the other's borders. In every case that had happened in history, it meant war, which was why any sovereign would never allow any such proposal. Feelings didn't matter, neither did the will of the couple in question. "I suppose we're back to fishing for consorts from the Empire," Florian sighed. "Are you really going to try to rush it?" Leanne asked. "I don't think so," Florian answered. "But if the right person comes along." "Yeah, right." The chance of the right person coming along was next to nil. She and her friends were always away somewhere busy doing things and they would only get busier. Time would run out before they realized it. "How's that thingy that you got from Lady Schultier coming along, anyway?" "It may as well be a paperweight for all that it's done," Florian replied. Florian hadn't sucked anyone's soul out as far as Leanne could tell, so that wasn't a surprise. Trying to figure out how to make any progress without Florian noticing what was going on was also proving to be impossible. They weren't exactly in a target-rich environment, or were they? "How long do we have until we get going?" Leanne asked. "I haven't heard anything from Clara," Florian answered. "Honestly, I don't look forward to this." "Did Lord Demiurge reply to your letter?" "He did. Most of the information he has is from closer to home, and even that doesn't look good. He asked if I could report the details of what we observed here. Something that a devil would be interested in, huh? Maybe it would make Florian so mad that she would go on a killing spree. Did demi-human souls count? It would be nice if they could get all 10 done at once. They entered the palace and went straight to their stateroom, where they found Clara sitting behind a small pile of books. Leanne turned her head sideways. It looked like she was reading up on the local history. "Anything useful?" Leanne asked. Clara looked up from her book. "I was just checking some things from the palace archive while we were still in Oraculon. It's not directly work-related, but it's eye-opening nonetheless." "Oh? What did you find out?" "When you learned the language of the Draconic Kingdom, did you find anything odd about it?" Yeah." Leanne sat down across from Clara. "It's not like the languages up north. The writing is all weird too. Since the Draconic Kingdom's close to the theocracy, I always thought it should be close to their language and script, but it isn't anything like it." Florian sat down behind her, picking up one of the books and leafing through its pages. "I always figured it was from somewhere else," she said. "It's a beautiful language, there's a nearly otherworldly quality to it." "The reason is that it's not even human," Clara said. "Not fully, at least. It's a form of Draconic meant to be employed by races with human-like physiologies." "Sweet," Leanne said. "So we learned how to speak dragon without realizing it?" "It's not dragon Draconic, but yes. The most interesting thing is that it's structured in such a way that those fluent in any other dialect of Draconic can understand all other Draconic speakers." "But anyone can do that?" "In Draconic, I mean." "Oh, I think I get it," Florian said. "That's very interesting." "Isn't it?" Clara smiled. Leanne looked between the two with a frown. "Get what?" "Structuring language like that isn't required," Florian said. "Obviously, knowing a language allows one to play tricks with it, but it's unnecessary for everyday communication because the world translates what we say to anyone who doesn't understand anyway." "Okay," Leanne said, "so why would they come up with a language like this?" Clara picked up a sheet of paper on the couch beside her. "This language also does the same thing." She held it up between them. Leanne and Florian leaned forward to peer at the page. It was one of the passages from the book Ludmilla found in the Katsa Plains. "There are actually pieces of Draconic that fit into this language," Clara told them, "and some realizations related to both helped me fill a lot of holes that were stumping me from before. They're still distinctly different languages, though. Based on the development of language in the surrounding countries, the one from Katza is clearly native to our region. What may explain why their languages work like this is the fact that they're both old. You lost me, Leanne said. Clara set down the paper, leaning forward with an excited gleam in her amethyst eyes. What if they work like this because they needed to? That would imply that this convenient translation thingy didn't exist back whenever they originally did. Exactly. Clara smiled. In order to facilitate communication between countless different races, special forms of language had to be developed. But that's so sad at the same time, Florine said. It is. Clara's smile slipped away. I hate you too when you get like this, Leanne grumbled. If Clara's conjecture is true, Florine said, it means that the people of ancient times created a common language so that the races of the world could communicate with one another. The civilization in the Katza Plains had many humans, but also plenty of other races, too. That doesn't sound very sad to me. The sad part is that we don't need that language anymore, Florine said. If I want to talk to a goblin, then all I have to do is speak in a language that I know and the world will translate it into something that they can understand. A monumental effort was made by the people of the past to bring the races of the world together into a single society. The people of today can achieve a similar result with no effort at all, yet they've all become segregated into their respective racial groups. You mean the people of today here, Leanne said. The people in Carnassus and those further east get along just fine aside from wars or invasions, and those are just a fact of life. Now that she thought about it, it was pretty weird. It was as if someone had drawn a line and said everyone past this point acts as if they live in a deep, dark hole. Well, almost. The Sorceress Kingdom aside, both the Draconic Kingdom and the Holy Kingdom of Roble got along just fine with their aquatic demi-human neighbors. Demi-humans from Carnassus could visit the Empire, too, though they rarely did. So, what did we get out of this? Leanne asked. It's just something valuable to know, Florine answered. We should already understand this from our work in the Great Forest of Tob, but this is just more proof that the world isn't as hostile a place as we grew up imagining. Well, the neighbors here are about as hostile as I grew up imagining, Leanne said. Do we have an itinerary yet, by the way? We'll be in Rivergarden by sometime tomorrow, Clara said. On that note, Queen Auriculus has disappeared somewhere. Huh? We lost track of her in the morning. Lord Tien has no clue where she went, the shadow demons can't find her and attempts at divination have turned up nothing. Her courtiers don't seem worried at all, so I can only assume that they know where she is and they aren't telling us. That wasn't mysterious at all. In terms of her physical capabilities, Queen Auriculus wasn't much different from the average human. Giving her escort the slip should have been impossible. Let's take the time to put together an advisory for the court, then, Florine said as she reached into her infinite haversack. These are the documents that Lord Demiurge provided when I asked about the potential effects of Lera on the Draconic Kingdom's population. The source of Florine's trepidation over their work in the East became readily apparent as they pored over the documents. Even with the weakened cultivar of Lera in Riastais, the effects of prolonged exposure were dire. Permanent brain damage, birth defects, miscarriage, stillbirths, babies born with the addiction? How did they figure that out? Before, Leanne could at least quip about the way the beastmen were herding humans would result in a strong bounce in the Draconic Kingdom's population. Now, she wasn't even sure if they could expect even that. The Royal Army's reports say that the distribution of Lera by the beastmen has a high variance in effectiveness, Clara said, but no matter how you look at it, this is still a tragedy. I don't think there's any nice way to summarize this, Florine said. Never mind being nice about it, Leanne said. What are they going to do? It says here that there are spells to treat the problems, but the Draconic Kingdom's temples are totally gutted. Could we bring in healers from the Sorceress Kingdom? Florine asked. Most places barely have enough to service their own populations, Clara shook her head. Even if we brought in the members of the royal court and the royal household, they'd be stuck here forever casting spells millions of times over. We have healers in the royal army, right? Leanne noted, the death priests. According to Ludmilla, they're specialized in supporting other Death Series servitors. Undead aren't affected by diseases, poisons or bodily ailments, so the death priests similarly have no countermeasures against them. Well, crap. A knock sounded at the door. They waited in silence as Amelia went to answer. A maid came to inform us that we will be departing in 2 hours, Ludmilla's lady's maid said when she came back. I guess we'll just have to have our audience on the boat, Leanne muttered. We'll be in River Garden by tonight, Clara said. We may just have to wait until a formal audience tomorrow. They split up to put their things together before heading down to the royal pier below Oraculon Palace. There, they found several members of the court. They were working as members of the palace staff, she supposed, already there preparing the barge for the trip. Directing them was Salacious Orul, who wore an outfit that looked like it would become utterly see-through if she was caught in the rain. Minister Sorul, Clara lowered her head in a curtsy, and Leanne and Florine followed suit. Has Her Majesty returned? Her Majesty has been in her chambers the entire time, Countess Corlin, the minister replied coolly. She has? Not as far as we know. The shadow demons went everywhere trying to find her. Grr, what are they playing at? We had some information that we wished to bring to Her Majesty's attention, Clara said. Would it be possible to speak to her on the way to River Garden? The Queen is tired, but I will let her know. A pair of footmen came up from behind them and the minister, or maybe she was a lady-in-waiting at the moment, turned her attention back to preparing the ship. If she was in her chambers all day, then why is she tired? Leanne. That's not what I meant. See, Clara? Her lewd nature is coming out. I don't know, but I don't think it's worth pursuing for now. These people have a lot of work ahead of them and we shouldn't distract them from their tasks. Followers of the Six sucked at being nosy. Everyone had a place and everyone respected everyone else's place. Even nobles like Clara and Ludmilla just let their people do their thing, patiently awaiting the results. One of the companies from Highfoot arrived an hour before departure, dividing themselves between the two barges prepared for the trip up the Oraculon. The Queen and her entourage arrived 30 minutes later. Lord Tian accompanied her as usual, and his steely expression didn't indicate that anything was amiss. Wow, she looks tired. Well, Minister Sorrel did say that she was tired. Good evening, Your Majesty, Clara made her greetings. Umu. Good evening, Countess Corlin. If I may ask, is everything all right? It would be strange to say that everything is all right, but if you are asking about our health, we are fine. A task demanded our attention that took up most of the day. Why couldn't they just say that in the first place? Maybe they weren't sure exactly what it was? Or maybe she went somewhere to do something she didn't want us to know about. Ugh, of all the things, why do you have to fixate on this? Sus things are sus. Who wouldn't get curious? Especially considering what it took to elude the security they assigned to her. You three look like you've taken something extraordinarily bitter, Queen Auricula smirked. As a matter of fact, Your Majesty, Clara replied, there was something that we wanted to share. We will hear it in the lounge, then. Hopefully, it is something that doesn't require too much thinking. Clara only smiled in response. The Queen sighed and walked past them to board the ship. Once they were underway, Queen Auriculus and her courtiers gathered in the hold, which had been converted by Leanne and Florian in Corlin Harbour. With the 24 courtiers and just as many guards, however, it was cramped. Clara, Leanne and Florian sat on a couch across the table from the Queen, and they were encircled by everyone else. Our delegation took the liberty of investigating the potential effects of the Beastmen's actions against your citizens, Clara said. Given the trends reported by our forces, there seems to be no immediate solution to the problems they will bring. Without a single exception, the faces of the surrounding courtiers turned pallid as Clara spoke at length of the potential long-term outcomes of the Beastmen's widespread distribution of Lera. Even Leanne, who already knew the details, could only stare gloomily at the table. What can we do but do what we can? Queen Auriculus said once Clara completed her report. The information you've shared with us is dire, to be sure, but standing around at a loss gains us nothing. Your country has already helped in so many ways, and we can hardly burden your people with our problems. Realistically, there was little more she could say. In more ways than one, Queen Auriculus was the personification of her country and her people. Small and constantly harried, they still resolutely faced whatever future lay ahead. Leanne idly wondered where the line lay for them. In Riastais and the Empire, families cut their perfectly healthy spares loose without a shred of remorse. The orphaned, crippled and afflicted, were left to rot in the streets, invisible to the rest of the population. Though they arrived in Rivergarden well past nightfall, the residents still showed up to greet their queen. The people were supposed to be in Oraculon in a week, but they returned in half that time to tend to their fellow citizens. Men, women, and children lined up along the waterfront, cheering as the ship eased into its moorings. Leanne frowned at the sight. The Draconic Kingdom was facing a severe labor shortage as a result of the occupation and its long-term effects. Of those that would be liberated in the East, a not insignificant portion would likely be liabilities rather than assets. She got that Queen Auriculus was a genuinely good person, but this wasn't a situation where a ruler could afford to be good. Every person that was tied up by the effort was one less person getting things back up and running. For the Queen's part, she didn't offer any words of encouragement as she usually did, instead walking quietly along the front of the crowd with Lord Tien at her shoulder. The people seemed to sense her mood and quieted down. At a certain point, she stopped to face a girl 2 or 3 years younger than Leanne. The girl panicked, stumbling back into the crowd. "Stop." The girl stopped. "Why are you trying to run?" Queen Auriculus asked. The girl's mouth worked silently for several moments before she looked down, covering her face with both hands. As with most of the women in the crowd, she was visibly pregnant. Harlot. Wench. Slut. That was what people in the north would call anyone who was discovered to be with child outside of wedlock. While Leanne wasn't sure if it was the same in the Draconic Kingdom, the sheer sense of shame was certainly shared. "I'm sorry," the girl sobbed. "Then I couldn't do anything. I'm so sorry." Queen Auriculus reached out to take the girl by her shoulders. The queen was shorter than the girl by half a head and possessed a more youthful appearance. Yet, somehow, no one would mistake who was the child between the two. "This is nothing to apologize for," she said. "If anything, we should be the one apologizing to you. The fault lies with us. Are you frightened? Worried for the future?" The girl nodded. Queen Auriculus smiled and drew her close. "We cannot demand that you set aside your fears," she said, "but we can say that you are not alone. All you have to do is reach out, let people know that you're scared, because they are scared as well. Share your burdens with others and help shoulder theirs in return. The people of our country have always done so, and that is how we have always survived. Just as one helps others, others will come to help them." Queen Auriculus separated from the girl. Her gaze swept across the crowd. "That goes for everyone here," she said. "We of the Draconic Kingdom will never forsake one another. Do not hate anyone for what happened, especially not the children that will come into your care. They had no choice in the matter, after all. As always, we will provide support to all who need it, so stand tall and work together to build an even better future than before." All around the crowd, expressions firmed and people nodded resolutely. Others embraced one another, sharing words of comfort. The malaise that Leanne hadn't even noticed was present lifted and was whisked away on the wind. "Queen Auriculus never ceases to amaze me." Leanne glanced at Florine, who was dabbing away her tears with a handkerchief. "I dunno." "What do you mean, I dunno? Have you ever seen the like?" "Nope, because no one can afford it." "I swear, Leanne, you're just so... What?" "It's a valid point. I can't think of any way that she can provide the support that she's promising. This isn't just a few people or even a single city, it's millions of unproductive dependents. Her words are empty reassurances, at best. If she tries to go through with them, she'll drive her country straight into a ditch." Florine gave her a sour look. Leanne waited for her to come up with a valid counter-argument, but she obviously couldn't.